feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
Hey everyone, this is Mark Scribner from the Shrimp Tank with my co-host John Warner from Link Ventures. And today, quite candidly, we have probably the best entrepreneurs, dual tandem today along with John Warner that we're interviewing. Some of the fastest growing companies in and around Boston globally that we're excited to get into the weeds about being a serial entrepreneur, taking risk, executing at the highest level. The Shrimp Tank can be found at theshrimptank.com/Boston. We are nationally syndicated through iHeart, Spotify, Stitch, SoundCloud, YouTube. Basically anywhere that you can follow your podcasts, you can find us. We'd like to get your followership. You just click on the subscribe here. That will get this show, all prior shows in your inbox, and we'd love to have that. Again, very humbling, two gentlemen. We have Carlos Cashman from Thrasio, and we have Dave Blunden from Link Ventures. Two amazing entrepreneurs that I think, John, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but at least in Carlos's case, one of the fastest $2 billion valuations in Massachusetts with amazing roots from MIT. These gentlemen have completely changed their respective landscapes in many different industries. They're crushing it at a level that I don't think we could do justice for. So, John, what do you think about today? What should we learn from these two amazing gentlemen?
Oh yeah, great, Mark. Thanks. And I know you and I have been talking about this show for a few days now. We're super excited. So the show we're kind of building around Carlos, and we brought in Dave because Dave is a classmate from MIT and has followed Carlos through his career. And as Carlos talks about stuff, I wanted to get Dave to kind of editorialize or comment and have a rich discussion for future entrepreneurs in this region to learn from these guys. So Carlos, he founded Thrasio in 2018. It's a name from Greek mythology. He could tell us more about that. It is the fastest profitable U.S. company ever to hit 1 billion valuation. It's the world's largest aggregator of Amazon third-party private label businesses. And to date, I believe, and I don't know if he can confirm this, I think they've bought 100 companies. I can only imagine what the process is. You know, do you like order all the items that Amazon offers and test them out? You're vertical agnostic. I don't think you like fads. Like you don't invest in finger spinners and things like that. And you're not interested in founder risk. But the companies you buy, then you go to work. And you have like a 500-step process, I think you call it the conveyor belt, to really scale them up and make them into juggernauts. And this is an interesting time for you to be doing this. Retail is moving online. Physical space is sort of yesterday. I think it's like a $14 trillion marketplace, and only 10% is online. And you're taking advantage of these tailwinds. And I'm excited to hear a little bit more about what you think the future holds. And also, people are searching more and more on Amazon, and maybe you could tell us, you know, what you make of that. I reached out to some mutual friends of ours. Bilal says you have an acute eye for consumer preferences and behavior changes. I reached out to Omri.
Bilal, that's great. I love that.
I reached out to Omri, who started a company around the same time you did, and his isn't as nearly as successful as Thrasio, but he said you built an impressive empire very quickly. I reached out to Chris Clooney, who said you're a thinker and a philosopher. He said he showed up in a tie when he tried to get hired by you, and you were on a bouncy ball, and he thought you were the receptionist, didn't realize you were the CEO. And then my favorite is I reached out to Nico Enriquez, who's a 30 under 30. So he's the next.
Way. You know Nico? I love Nico.
He said you're crazy smart, super methodical, and you're just fun and funny. And then he got to know you in a parking lot when he bought a branded life-size goat. And he says that you're someone who loves to help the little guy win. And then Dave, my business partner, has told so many stories about you. So I'm so glad we're getting this on record for the world. So you grew up in St. Louis, Peoria, and Tulsa. You're a serial entrepreneur. You hacked MIT by creating your own major. In the show, we're going to come back to the MIT story. I know you were at Bell Labs while you were at MIT. You moved to New York. You tried to get a job with CompUSA. They wouldn't hire you, even though you were a programmer from MIT. You used the white pages to find a business. And then you biked around the country for 2 years on a motorcycle. And I think Dave reached out to you. You guys were connected by a fraternity. And maybe the first part of the show, I'm kind of curious, how did Dave and Kogo Labs kind of connect with you around Course Advisor? Like tell that story, because I think there's a lot there. And then I want to talk about Thrasio, which is like, you know, one of the big hits. You know, is that a one-hit wonder, or is that going to really go places? And then come back to the MIT story. Carlos, how does that sound?
That sounds great. I love the way you summarized everything, so I don't have to, because it would have taken me like 10 times longer to do it. So that's great. But look,
and one last thing for listeners, Carlo, there are a lot of billionaires that go to MIT. They're royal princes or whatever. But I think to date, there have been 9 people that have come to MIT and made it big and became a billionaire. And I don't think Carlos would tell you this, but I'm tracking Carlos, and I think he's going to be the 10th billionaire out of MIT. And it may be happening as we're doing the show or in a few weeks. But if you want another reason to listen to what this guy has to say, that's another one. So yeah,
reason to listen to anybody, but I hope so. That would be wonderful. Don't get me wrong, but that's not something I'm vectoring myself towards overall. No, look, and let me start by saying Dave is a legendary entrepreneur. Like, and I'm just trying to follow in what, you know, some of what he's done, and he doesn't take a lot of credit for everything he's done. But like, we met when on the deck at our fraternity house, and he was running Serious Recognition. Right? Remember the handwriting rec company, which was a propagating neural net in the late 80s and early 90s. I mean, you were way ahead of everybody there. And it's just been awesome that we were able to find, and we stayed in touch because of my love for entrepreneurship and his too. And he was always doing entrepreneurial things and kept talking. So we stayed in touch over the years, even though we weren't the same years at school. We didn't even overlap. Mm-hmm. But there's a group, we have a lot of entrepreneurs that came from our house, and there's a group of us who just like to talk about that and stay in touch on stuff. So that's how we reconnected. So after I'd taken a company public in the .com crash, right? That's when I got on the motorcycle and said, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I'm just driving west out of New York. But after a couple of years, it took a little time, about a year living on that, writing a book, doing some other crazy stuff. I started to come back to what do I really love to do? What do I like to do? And it's like, I like getting groups of people together, starting, you know, going after something, and that's starting a company. And so I really embraced it. And I ended up starting a company in New Mexico, and it wasn't growing super fast and didn't need me there full time. So I again had been emailing with Dave about different things here and there. And I remember he'd sent out a message saying, you know, he needs the greatest math guy, you know, to come and help him with something he was working on. And he said someone like Mika Adler. That's also another great story, because I was like, why don't you just get Mika Adler? And Mika and I were buddies too, and had been talking. He's like, well, Mika just got tenure, you know, so he's probably not going to leave. And I was like, doesn't that mean he can leave and he can do whatever he wants? And I think that's when he connected with Mika. So I had connected with Mika about, I needed a great math guy also. See, you know the great people, you know, there's certain people, you know, that when you're in your circle, they're just super freaking smart, right? And capable of doing certain things. And I had this idea for doing betting on anything, right? It was a gambling idea. And this was 2003 or something, 2004. That, you know, why can't you bet that Brady will complete the next pass? And you can put in that bet right away. And, you know, within 30 seconds, it happens and you settle. I figured it was just a math problem. So I'd actually contacted Mika to say, hey, how do we set this up? Cantor Fitzgerald, incidentally, actually ended up making this into a business. And they, you know, it's all over the casinos in Vegas now. It's pretty common to do these prop bets, right? Is this field goal going to happen or not? But it wasn't happening back then. And so I had that idea. I thought it was neat. And I contacted Mika. And Mika was working with Dave. And the two of them were like, he said, you know, we got some interesting things going on here. So we got on the phone and we're talking. And he said, you know, that's a neat idea, but there's something better we're doing in search, long tail search. And then Dave described to me his vision for long tail search, which was really freaking cool. So I actually happened to be going to a wedding in Scotland. And on the way home, it was easy to connect through Boston. So I just said I'd connect through Boston and come see these guys. So that's how we reconnected. That was 2004, I think, right? You were just getting started with this stuff.
No, we're just getting started. I had invested in TripAdvisor in 01, 02 through Flagship Ventures, which had a different name at the time. And I ran into the guys at a venture capital event. And you know, if you remember 04, the market had completely imploded. This was after 9/11. So nothing good was happening in any part of the economy. And I saw the TripAdvisor guys and they said, hey, we're killing it. And I said, come on, what are you talking about? What do you mean you're killing it? They said, no, we're up to 40. I said, 40 what? They said, 40 million of revenue. And I was like, that's impossible. I just saw you guys and you weren't even doing half of that. You know, they ended up growing in 4 sequential years, 1 million, 5 million, 25, 75. And so I ran those numbers by Carlos, and no one had ever heard of growth rates like that, profitable growth rates like that. Nowadays, with Thrasio, it's taking it to a whole nother level. But back then it was just completely unheard of. So
Hey,
the key to me was fearlessness, though. I think that, so many people from MIT are brilliant. But the reason I wrote to Carlos is because the relentless energy and the fearlessness are the attributes that are rarer, that make people succeed in a transition to something that new and that crazy high growth.
What I just want to build off that, Dave. When we were doing our kind of pre-interview, Carlton, you alluded to this real quickly that back in the .com, like you kind of, you had it was going the other way. And Dave, you had mentioned that attribute of like oftentimes a serial entrepreneur, like they don't become more conservative, they potentially become more aggressive. And I was wondering, Carlos, if you could talk about maybe the mindset, like as you were coming out of that .com. I don't know if you would classify that as a failure or it just didn't work the way, but what was the mindset that got you like right back in it?
It wasn't right back in. This is tough. It's not easy to do. And I've recently, I've reconnected with my partner in that business, and we both were licking our wounds in different ways and are finally talking about it. This is freaking 20 years later. I mean, it's crazy, but so look, I had some success at a few other startups I joined very early in the late 90s, right? And that sold really quickly, whatever, had a bit of money, right? And I put that into my company I started, Opus 360, that I took public. And I remember Dave was raising money at the same time I was for Data Sage, and me and another fraternity brother was raising money for his company, and we were all talking about it. And we ended up going public, which was just, I think, the wrong decision. If we'd have had another option, I don't know if we had any other options really, but and so I was one of these guys, I was worth more millions than I had years in life, right? At that point on paper. And I'd heard people say this on paper for years. I never knew what that meant on paper. It means it's money, just use it. Well, it's stock that's locked up. And even when it's not locked up, you're a founder. So if you sell, everybody goes, oh my God. And so you can't sell. So I had this, I almost 30 million on paper, I guess. I was 28 years old. But I never counted on it being really real, honestly, because it was there. I didn't know, the company, I mean, it wasn't, we had revenue, but we were losing money. It wasn't successful to me. The idea of a company is just a business that makes something for X, sells it for Y is greater than X, and makes a profit. And, this was the .com time. And not everyone thought that way about it. We raised 140 million privately and we're able to go public without that. But that always bothered me. But it still doesn't mean that's not in the back of your head. So what happened with that was it went public, stock went down. I skied it all the way into the basement. We sold the company to an international firm who wanted to basically back into a public listing, right? Which is kind of funny. It's kind of like a SPAC back in the day. We were forced with that. And I came out of there with nothing. It was penny stock and I had less money than I'd invested in the company. And I was in debt. And, this is when I just kind of burned out. The process was difficult, raising all that money. It's difficult. It's a difficult world to raise money from VCs and stuff. They're not all quality, shall I say. There are a lot of people I met in that process I was not happy with. So after that happened, I just said, I rented my place in New York, put what I needed on a motorcycle and drove west. I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I don't know if I'll ever do business again. I was really upset. A buddy of mine was a VC, another fraternity brother of ours, Dan Degnan, decided to come with me too, quit his job, but he paid off his student loans because he'd been at Goldman Sachs smartly and somewhere else, but joined me for part of the trip. But I remember being in the middle of Canada, camping by a lake, and I would monitor the stock price when we could get on the internet, because I could sell a little bit to make like $1,000 a month or something like that, right? And it doesn't cost much. You're living on a bike, $2,000 a month. And the stock, was going from 20 cents to 10 cents to 30 cents to 5 cents. It was just, this penny stock thing. And it went down to like half a penny. I was wiped out completely. I wouldn't even have money to keep paying for the motorcycle trip. And I'm sitting there in the dark with him, just thinking about it. That was basically my staring into the abyss moment and saying, what the hell am I going to do? And what I realized, I'm lucky enough that I was living on a motorcycle happily for months, feeding myself cost very little. I knew I could get a job as a dishwasher or something if I had to. And I was in that mindset that I was just like, F it, screw the world. I'll just do whatever. And paying for gas was cheap because it was a bike. And I had credit cards. Luckily, credit cards really tied me over in this through a lot of this period, right? Because I had great limits. I'd always taken care of my credit. So I had $40,000, draw I could use on a credit card. So, I was okay. but it really made me just examine everything. And it wasn't like I'm going to get back into business. Like I was thinking of becoming a therapist, to be honest with you, like going back to medical school. Like I didn't know what, but it was just that it's time, you need to heal, right? And so that's what I was talking about. Like I ended up in, over the course of the next year, making my way to New Mexico, where my parents lived in Albuquerque. I'd never lived there, but went to see them. And ended up, staying for a little while, got stuck there through the winter. And that's when I really started to think about what I love to do. And that's when I said, when you find this, there's a lot of times we think we want to do things. Like I thought I wanted to be a writer or a film guy. But what I actually enjoyed doing was building companies, was getting groups of people together to go tackle a cool problem. And if you can integrate those things, it's great. I mean, how many people do you know that think they should be a doctor? Their parents think they should be doctors, so they think they should be doctors. And they go to school to become doctors, and they're not happy. And like if you could integrate the things you think you want to do with what you really want to do and what you're actually good at, then I think that's when you unleash a whole lot of power. So it was in New Mexico where I just finally said, you know what? I like doing this. I kept, after enough time off, I kept having these ideas. I had the idea for Kickstarter back then because they had kicked Family Guy off the air and I was pissed. And I remembered how Star Trek had gotten back on the air with a letter writing campaign. But I'm like, why letters? We could build a website and all the fans could give like $10. I was figuring out how much it costs to produce an episode and how much a season would cost, how many fans we need. I was like, I'll build a site where people can fund their own shows. But you didn't have Facebook. You didn't have anything back then. LinkedIn, it wouldn't have worked. It was too early. It was like, what? But I realized I enjoyed coming up with ideas and trying to start things. So, it wasn't a simple, like, I'm going to come back, bounce back. It was just this progressive process that kind of happened. And then it ended up, I was at a brunch, literally having brunch with my wife, her now wife, she was my girlfriend then, her best friend's family in New Mexico. And, I didn't know anybody, but I started talking to her best friend's father. And he had built this software at the Electric Power Research Institute. It was amazing and it sounded great to me. And he was a consultant, he had the rights to it. So 4 hours after brunch, everybody's gone. He and I are in the office and we're starting a company. And, so that's how I got back into it, basically. Long answer.
It's amazing to me that there are only about a dozen true serial entrepreneurs in the Northeast that have started 3 or more companies worth $100 million or more, and I think we know all of them. In fact, I think we're all friends.
You're behind half of them, Dave, or all of them also. I think
that's actually about right. But I think every one of them has lost 80-90% of their net worth at some point in their career. I don't think anyone has ever gone from plus 30 million to negative net worth other than you, and then bounced back to all-time highs. So that's got to be some kind of record.
Dave, we're going to go to the Thrasio story, but before we do, any other observations or questions you have about the course advisor moment for Carlos?
Well, I didn't realize the moment when my email arrived to your inbox, I didn't realize actually until just now how far things had shifted for you. So I guess that's just pure luck on my part that the timing lined up. But I think the big takeaway for me is the transition. Your prior company was enterprise. Your career up to that point was software, as was mine. And then that transition over to internet. And then I think it's been no looking back, right? Everything since then, all the companies have been internet, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. And mostly consumer too. Yeah. But the act of starting a business, I mean, at least from how I do it, right? I'm not an expert in anything. I'm not a great coder. I'm not a biologist or anything. I'm an organizer of people. So, for me, whether it's, selling enterprise HR software or building an internet lead generation company, or, I don't know what the next thing might be, or building an Amazon, consumer direct products company, it's the tasks, as far as I'm concerned, are the same in what I do. So, I don't think making the transitions was very hard for me. I've always told people that, but that's because I'm not good at a lot of shit.
Yeah, I did.
I think that's a critical. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Mark. But I think that's a critical attribute because when we started doing this together, the internet was a $5 billion business in the U.S. And it's tiny. It was tiny, but it was growing at an insane rate. I think in 2017 it got bigger than TV, and then last year it's bigger than all other media combined. And so, when you look at opportunities like that, there is no incumbent expert, who's done it for the last 20 years. It's only nimble entrepreneurs. And so the being the person who's willing to move to something new when it's clearly the next big thing, that's a rare attribute. And I think that's what kind of defines the serial entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Carlos, tell us about Thrasio. Like, where is it today? Where did it come from, and where's it going?
Well, so, it's funny because I think about Course Advisor, we went from like 1 million to 7 million in revenue. It was a rocket ship, right? And 20 plus the next
1
year.
year.
You told the story of TripAdvisor's revenue, right? Up to 75 in 5 years. So like we did 500 million in our second year. I mean, like it is crazy. And so now all my gauge of numbers is just so thrown off. Like when I'm looking at business, I get business plans all the time, you know, and send them to funds. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, so we went, you know, from a couple of million, we started, you know, late in 2018, right? So had a few months of business there, so did a couple million. Remember, we had our first $1 million month that December, I think, and we thought it was pretty cool. You know, we do more, you know, way more than that a day now, right? So, you know, then it went really quickly. What was funny was I created this. I honestly did not know the scale at which this could go or the pace, but I had just an idea. You know, you get a gut feel. You look at, okay, there's a few of these businesses for sale. We bought 5 of these. We're now doing a couple million. So I created these posters that said, I just wanted some sort of alliteration. They said 120 to 2020. So I wanted us to be 100 million in revenue, 20 million in EBITDA by February 2020. I just liked all the twos. And I made 3 of those. I sent one to our New York office, and I had one here in the Boston office, which was behind the Dunkin' Donuts in Dover. And I sent one to the Houston office, which is where Stephanie was just hanging out in WeWork. And, you know, they're like, what the heck is this? I said, hey, you know, we got to have some goals. Well, we actually hit that goal by November of 2019. I mean, that was freaking crazy. And that's when I think we really started to get the sense, like, that's when I really had to start to believe that this thing was growing like it was. And honestly, the biggest thing, most important thing I've probably done up to then and since then was keep hammering it into our team, our management team. They're the ones who built this company and done everything great, but that this is going faster than you think. Hire faster. They'd give me a hiring plan, you know, in early 2019 and say, here's where I plan to be by December. And I'd say, okay, you need to be there by May. And they'd be like, what? And I'd say, you need to be there by May. So you're already behind on your hiring plan. And like, just, you got to do it. Let's go fast. And I would just start, you know, cramming to get people. Heck, you know, and going everywhere I could to do that and building the systems. But to our team's credit, they've always stepped up and done that. But they need that reminder. Everybody does. Every single person, like, you know, you need to move it up. You need to go faster. I've never seen, look, you can't hire many people who've blitz scaled companies at this rate, right? I mean, here we are, like going almost 3 years old. We're well over 1,100 people around the world, right? I mean, we're hiring 110 people a month right now. We didn't have 110 people in the US before the pandemic lockdowns, right? Yeah. That was just, you know, 14 months ago.
Yeah.
Right? So it is
70 people in the early days, in the first, you know, first go around. Hey, Carlos, one of the things that in some of the previous interviews that I watched is you coined the phrase centers of excellence, and you alluded to this a couple times when you were talking about how you really empower like really good people, but you view everyone as centers of excellence. Like you find the right people, but you empower them to you know, do the job the right way, and the people is very, very important to you. But can we go back a little bit in the early days when you had the ad agency, when this company and this concept, you started seeing this environment start to emerge by the clients that you were working with. You were solving for Facebook ads and things like that, but you started to see this concept come at you from the early days in the ad agency.
Yeah, it was coming from so that was like the broader World Wide Web, like not like Amazon ecosystem necessarily, but like we had an agency that did Facebook performance advertising, right? We did some Google, but mostly Facebook, and it was all customer acquisition. You know, this was the background that I'd come at from Course Advisor and stuff, learned how to do this in different medium. And so most of our customers were e-commerce companies. We had some lead generation companies too, but it's because we were very good at getting customers at a certain price, right? So and what I was noticing was there was more like, you know, we had some very big e-commerce companies like BarkBox and things like that. But then we've got these small groups of 4 or 5 entrepreneurs shipping product over from somewhere in Asia. And, you know, we were building their enterprise value. Like they're like, okay, we don't know how to sell this. So we figured out everything. Here's the landing page. Here's the campaign. And when it works, it works. And so we were creating value. These guys would go around and either raise money or sell. I saw a couple of times, you know, a business for 40, 50 million bucks. And here I am, you know, with a smallish agency, you know, worth probably, you know, 10 to 20 million, something like that. And, you know, doing all the work to build it. So the idea for me, I just as an entrepreneur, I'm like, I don't need those guys. I can get my own products. And I know enough to know they're different businesses, but I immediately started thinking about what's the opportunity. And since I know how to get the people, how to train them, how to make them great marketers and doing customer acquisition on this new medium of Facebook. And this is 2013, 14, and 15, right? Facebook was just the ad market on Facebook was just taking off, and we were very good at it, and we were ahead of the game. So how can I use them to make these businesses better? So we were thinking about starting something in e-commerce. I mean, I think most people love selling stuff. It's just fun. So we were thinking about what could we sell, what products. I had some customers we were testing some Amazon stuff with too. But the idea was really initially because I was seeing all these leads come in that were Shopify websites doing 1 million a year to 4 million a year, didn't have the money to spend on Facebook, wanted to try it. And I just thought, look, if I gave them the money, like each one needs to spend 150 grand, but if it doesn't work, you don't keep doing it, but they're profitable. If it does, you turn a $4 million business into a $40 million business. And so I was talking about that with my partner, Josh, who's been a friend for a long time. And we were noodling new ideas because he was out of his thing and looking for something. And he just said at one point, I think we could raise some money and just buy these guys and take them over, and you get the marketing team and you do it. And I was like, well, that's great, because then all the value will accrue to us. And I was like, out of 10 of these businesses, 5 of them will be successful. We'll improve them by knowing how to market. So that's where it started. And then one of the things we thought we would improve them by, look, there's this whole fear, uncertainty, and doubt, the FUD spread about Amazon. And certainly in the direct-to-consumer world, it's this, you got to own your customer. Amazon owns the customer. You don't. So don't sell there. I think it's just totally crazy and misbegotten. And so one of the things we thought was, we'll take these businesses and sell the products on Amazon, because that's where the people are, right? And Amazon's a mall, it's a marketplace. Why would you not put your stuff in the biggest marketplace in the world? So, so what we thought we would help these businesses by doing that. So we started looking at Amazon. And as they say, the rest is history. We decided just to go on Amazon. And now we do direct to consumer, but we didn't for a while.
Hey, Carlos, I know you're about 100 companies you've bought. How many companies do you see buying? And do you have a favorite company and a strangest company and a company you don't like in your portfolio? And then on the search, Alta Vista, Lycos, Google, people don't realize how much now people are searching on Amazon. Can you finish that thought? So the 2 questions.
Yeah, so product search in particular. So the product search, about 60% of product search starts on Amazon in America, right? So that's pretty crazy, right? Now if you take millennial women between 18 and 34, let's realize most products are bought by women, right? Most of the shopping budget, 80% of the home shopping budgets are controlled by women. They are the largest part of that market and very important, right? But I think I saw a stat that's women between 18 and 36 or something, 84% of their searches start on Amazon for products. So this has become an ingrained behavior in the US and in the West more and more so as Amazon starts to win in other markets, right? But there's other marketplaces that have copied them around the world and have probably similar numbers, right? So, you're talking about a significant number of product searches starting on Amazon. The interesting thing for us also is that 80% of those searches are unbranded. So you're fully talking about roughly 60 to 65% of all product searches, people looking for products in America, certainly, and increasingly in the West, being unbranded searches for products that begin on Amazon. So you need to understand the search engine ecosystem, which is Amazon, and how it functions differently from anything else. So that's sort of answering the latter part of your question. Now I've forgotten the first part. What did you?
You're at 100 companies. How many companies are you going to buy, and what are some of your favorite products?
I won't tell you ones I don't like. And actually, there's nothing I don't like. I love everything we got. So we're over 100. We're probably 120, 130 now. I mean, it's we're doing almost a business every other day now. It's pretty crazy. I'd always told my team, in the same vein as I told you, how I'd push them to hire faster and be ready. At the beginning of 2019, I said, you need to all be building for when we're acquiring a business a day, one a day, and you need to be building to that now, because it takes time to hire, recruit, train, build the systems, that everything we've got, right? The training and online learning we have inside the company is amazing, because we have to do that because there aren't people who know how to do this stuff, right? It's new. So yeah, we've probably got 130, but that makes us have between 15 and 20,000 products, right? And look, how can it? There's so many. I don't even know many of the things we have. If I tell you, I can tell you a couple of my favorites, because the first business we bought, which I just bought before we even had a company, I just bought it myself so we get in the business, right? It's that phrase that Brian Armstrong said in one of his podcasts: action produces information. I've always worked that way. I love it. He just put words to it really well. But I just thought, we can talk about this all day. Let's just buy a freaking business. So we bought this business. Oh, you know what? We're gonna have to switch. You just lost me on the camera. I'll keep talking.
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
So
The
we,
podcast won't know.
yeah, podcast, the only video cast will know. So we bought this business, and it wasn't a great business when we got honest. It was okay, but it was very small, doing like, let's say, I think it was a couple $100,000 a year in revenue, right? And it's a frother, a milk frother. It's a handheld battery powered mixer basically. And if you went to my drawer in my kitchen, I have probably 10 different mixers I bought off Amazon because I drink bulletproof coffee, right? It's coffee mixed with butter and MCT oil, that whole thing. And like, to mix, you need to mix it up because the butter's like, comes out of the fridge, whatever. And I said these big mixers, like even the handheld ones, you drop them into that and it just shoots coffee all over your kitchen, which I did several times. You can't use a regular one, whatever. So I couldn't find anything. And this little milk frother, which is designed to make frothy milk for coffee, was perfect. It's battery powered. You plunk it in, it always works, no plugs, anything like that. It is such a great product. So I love it. It was called Cafe Casa. We still sell it under that brand, but the brand product is now called Frothy by Cafe. My team's done an amazing job sort of redoing the look and the packaging. But so that product just languished for a while. It was really funny because we knew that this was Thrasio was kind of going to be somewhat of a portfolio theory, right? And that every buy wouldn't be great, but some would be amazing. None would be terrible at the rates we're buying. Some might, but you buy enough, you'd be okay. But when you start this, you run a real risk, certainly as the first person in the category. Right now, we've proven it. People are throwing money at it, but like people didn't necessarily believe that we could do this. So if we'd have screwed up on our first or second or third acquisition, like the money would have stopped flowing, and the money needed to flow to make this thing really work. So one of our debt partners, Upper 90, the great guys, super fun out of New York, right? Billy, Jason, and Alex, who started that. Billy kept, every time I'd see him, he'd ask, "How's Cafe Casa doing?" Because they hadn't come in on the debt yet, and they were going to it. And we acquired 2 or 3 other businesses really quickly. And we just kept going, "Oh, it's great. It's doing fine." It was like flat and then starting to go down. But we acquired enough other businesses fast enough that were doing well. And we just stopped focusing on it. 200 grand a year, we realized that was the wrong strategy, right? We needed bigger businesses that were more established, better products that were leaders in their category, rather than one we thought we could resuscitate. So, here we are. It grew really rapidly. We were able to raise, those guys were awesome at getting us to capital. We got 30 million in debt in short order. We're able to keep growing with that and keep getting the products. Fast forward about a year and a half, and Cafe Casa is now one of the dead low-end products that no one pays attention to, but we like to train our new people on these, right? So give them a chance to operate something. And it was still going to return in 4 years what we paid for it, right? Probably, but it was making, probably less than 100 grand a year. And one of our people came in, and it just shows when you get trained well and you get the focus. A new brand manager came in, she focused on it, and she sold out a year's worth of inventory in 2 weeks. So now the business is doing, more than what we paid for it every month. It's like crazy. It's awesome, but it shows like how much we've learned from that point to now. So that product always will hold a special place in my heart because it was the first one we bought, but I use it almost every single day. And we also have a great waiter's corkscrew, which I use almost every single day also at the other end of the day. It's called Haiku, HICOUP, but if you search for waiter's corkscrew, it's the top one.
Carlos, Comp USA doesn't know what they're missing in terms of a sales guy from those early days.
Yeah, I'd like to let Dave ask the next question, if that's all right. We kind of, we're steamrolling over here.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I would say, before I say that, for anybody who wants to be a multi-billionaire, there's 2 things that you can see in Carlos. One is endless, boundless energy. That might be the frother part of that. But also passionate. You could just see, he is so passionate. And I know John and Dave, you deal with some of the most successful people on this planet, but I would just ask real quickly before Dave asks his question, is that a prerequisite for what you guys see for the formula? Is the energy and the passion?
Carlos, you taking that or am I?
No, that was for you guys, he said.
So, well, I think it's I think people that have the energy level of Carlos don't really recognize it in themselves. But when an outsider looks at him relative to everyone else, if you go to a crowded room, it just completely stands out. And it's not an absolute prerequisite, but I think it's definitely it enables you to maintain many, many more connections in life. And those connections generate random events, and those random events create unexpected success. So I think if you looked at Carlos's LinkedIn, which, is 500 plus, but it's probably like 5,000, the number of people who know him, remember him, talk about him, think about him on a daily basis is probably 10, 20, 30 times higher than the average person. And that creates the opportunity to get lucky, the opportunity to learn, the opportunity to see trends before other people see them. So all of that, I think, is a key factor. Also, just to put Carlos's achievement in context, in the history of the world, there are only 6 times that founders have sat down and had an idea, and then 4 years later or less, they've created $1 billion or more of founder value. So value that accretes to the original founders. And that doesn't really get in the news all that much. But if you're aspiring to create a company, that's the metric you really want to look at. And the other companies on that list are Yahoo, Facebook, eBay, Booking.com, Snapchat, household names. And so I think Thrasio is going to be the number 7 on that all-time list, which is just an insane achievement. I think one thing that you see is recycled relationships. So if you're going to do something that quickly, you're not going to be able to interview and get to know people you've never met before. You need to carry relationships forward from your prior companies, your prior endeavors, from school. And Carlos, if you can comment on that, I think that's a kind of a missing ingredient that's universal to anyone trying to start a new endeavor.
Yeah, look, honestly, that was an amazing summary of what, like, I told my wife one day, I said, look, people talk about superpowers, whatever. I think it's kind of bullshit, but like, if I have one, it's serendipity. And it's because of exactly what you said, knowing a lot of people, then just luckily at the right time, I get the right person or the right opportunity. I think Martin Sorrell talked about this on a podcast once and called it the return on fame. It's not necessarily being famous, but having a lot of connections. You said people are thinking about you, they contact you and go, hey, I got this thing that might be good for your business. So, and you're like, wow, that works. And look, the people, that is so 100% true. I've told this story before and I'll tell it again. Like, at the start of this company, we were doing a whole company offsite. It would, normally be management, but we were small, right? Every quarter, because we started in multiple cities. So our third one in early 2019, we had about 22 people at. Actually, our head of acquisitions, Ken, like Josh invited him. He wasn't even working for us yet, but he came. Actually came to the one even before, but we had about 22 people there. And 21 of them were direct connections of mine, people I'd worked with before in the last 20 years, or friends of mine, or a friend of mine. And within the first 50, Josh started adding a bunch of people soon after that. Of the first 50, probably 42 of them were direct friends of me, Josh's and mine. Like both people wanted to work with you again. That's a big thing. And I always expect that out of my managers too. Like, you look at that, all of our management team has brought in people they knew also. And that's a good sign. But as Dave said, it's shortcuts. You don't have time. I didn't have time to go interview for every one of these roles and spend 3 months to hire a head of creative and brand strategy. I happened to have a guy who I thought was very good at it. And look, we did get lucky with some of this, but coming from performance marketing, had that network too, right? I pulled someone from the Kogo, and Carlos universe, right, that we knew and has been awesome and worked at a couple of those companies, right? And a unique thing out of that. So 7 of our first 9 employees in Boston were actually senior managers, like senior, but not just doers. They could do both, but they're senior managers. The wild thing is, here we are 2.5 years later, over 1,000 people, and they're still in that role. Like, that is freaking crazy. Through all that growth, all those different changes. And look, I think that comes with having this group of people, right? And you know what they're capable of, but you also can help each other grow together, which is super important. That comes also with just being old. I think I learned something in the last couple of years, but I was surprised that like entrepreneurial success is way higher in a group in 40 and over, right? The percent of successful entrepreneurs between 40 and 50 is way more than those under 30, right? But we all the stories tend to focus on the 20-year-old who drops out of school, because that's an exciting, an inspirational story. But I think when you look at the overall success, because you're ready, you have that network, hopefully, right? In both the capital side and the people side.
I think that's very much in common between Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Carlos Cashman. When you survey around, people want to come and work with you because they know you're going to go somewhere. It's not going to be boring. No matter what, it's going to be something big. And if you survey the MIT community, they have that feeling about Carlos. It's just I'm going to hitch my wagon to this. And then when you look at the success of companies, especially companies that grow very, very quickly, they have these 10, 20, 30Xer people that are just beyond exceptional in their role, in their domain, whether it's a developer or an analyst or a salesperson. They're just so far and away better. And Steve Jobs could always attract them. And that's why, Apple was great. And then Steve left and Apple was horrible. And then Steve came back and Apple was great again. That same thing, if you just look at the LinkedIn profiles of the people that are following Carlos and joining him again for a second or third time, it's a huge number. It's a very measurable factor. And you can't grow that quickly without that, because you need to know the people and what they're capable of.
Look, I am only the measure of my people, the people I know. This success accrues entirely to them. All I did was get the right people and get out of their way, man, and make sure they have the tool. That's what I consider my job, right? Is just making sure they have the tools they need to succeed, and continuing getting the best people I can out there.
So Carlos, we're going to switch to the MIT part of this interview, but before I do, are there any observations you want to make of Dave, or any questions you have for Dave that you always wanted to ask but never had a chance to?
I got lots of chances to ask Dave questions. So no, look, as I said before, I think Dave, he is great at deflecting credit, and he deserves an enormous amount of credit for everything he has built here in Boston in particular. But you've been behind, billions of dollars worth of companies. It's amazing. And entrepreneurs, and they're yours. I mean, look, Course Advisor was your idea, right? The idea to do long tail search and all that. And then you spawned, half a dozen huge companies out of that, and way more than that now that we're going to hear about soon. So I think it's amazing. And it's, as I said, created an enormous amount of real value. And you're kind of an unsung, you try to stay behind the scenes, man, but we're going to pull you out a little bit here. You're really one of the, you've started more companies than I have. Right. And you've just been.
I'm older than you. That's the only reason that's true. But I think, but I think everything you said about how it works is completely the way it works for me too. It's a chain reaction. You're not doing it, you're enabling it. And then that starts a chain reaction of other great people. And so all you're doing is transmitting the process and the knowledge to the next person, and then they're succeeding, and then they're helping the next person succeed. And Carlos has already agreed to come back to Kogo Labs and also to our MIT incubator and mentor and coach the next generation. So that willingness to give back and keep the chain going, I think, is just the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah, I'm going to pivot that over, John, to MIT, because I know Dave is very, very passionate about keeping some of the talent that's out there locally. And both of you have a lot of experience in Boston, but could maybe you talk about why Boston, why Link, because Link is an amazing company with also an amazing track record, but why is it important to keep the talent and the roots with MIT locally?
Yeah, to me, the most humiliating thing in the entire world is when you go to Logan Airport and you walk through the terminal and there's a wall that has the greatest things that have ever happened in Boston. And on that wall, you've got all this amazing history, incredible universities. And then one of the things, plaques on the wall, says Facebook was founded in Boston, but then left and went to Silicon Valley. Like, rip that thing off the wall right now, because
Y Combinator was founded in Boston, in Cambridge. Where did it end up? West Coast.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so anyway, you see California's kind of falling apart a little bit right now, and we'll see where that goes. But the truth for a long time has been that the talent density in Boston and in Cambridge is higher than anywhere else on the planet. It's the densest innovation cluster in the world, more startups, more venture capital dollars, more new ideas, more Nobel Prize winners than anywhere else on the planet in that dense area. Yet the MIT community has not been great at starting very successful new companies, especially relative to Stanford and California. And there's no good reason for that other than the lack of inspiring leaders and mentors, coaching. So it just got late for the tidal wave to start. But I think, now that it's started, I think it's very likely to grow faster than other places that are kind of tapped out.
Yeah. So just in this section, can you both talk about what MIT meant for you guys as undergrads, and why did you guys stay around? I think MIT is a powerful experience for those that get in, whether it's undergrad or grad school. What was it like for you guys, and then why didn't you get that pull to go somewhere else?
I did live in New York and Silicon Valley, so maybe start with Dave on this, but I came back. That's the
You
good
came
tell.
back. Well, that's an important point, Carlos. Tell us about the coming back. What was the motivation there?
Well, I don't know. It's weird. Like maybe it's because I'd spent enough time out here. It was a combination of things. I mean, again, spending 15 years before that in New York and Boston, right? Actually, more than that. It was probably almost 20 before I tried to move out there. I'm an East Coaster. I don't know. There's just a different mindset and different to the people out here and the way we go about things, right? And so I thought, having done internet startups my whole career and high tech software stuff, I should try living in the Valley. I didn't quite move into the Valley. I moved into Sonoma Valley, which is a little different, but I went out there and I was down all the time in San Francisco and stuff. I don't have the same vibe as the community out there. I think it's just so much more focused on this home run mentality, and that's all they want to do. And that's fantastic. That's a model that works, but it works better for the VCs than it does the entrepreneurs.
That's right.
So like, I don't know, like, not that we don't want home runs here, but like, it was just a different attitude. And the combination of that, and then like I'd meet startups, and my whole network was out here. I built it out here, but it's strong. Like, it's just, there's a reality to the people out here. And I don't want to, there's a lot of, you can go look up all the jokes you want between East Coast and West Coasters. So I don't want to impugn anybody. I have a lot of friends who live out there and work in the industry, but I just find that there's less facade in people and their dealings on the East Coast. It's that whole thing where New Yorkers are yelling, "Hey, screw off," but they're really just saying, "Hey, how you doing?" Like, it's just, on the West Coast, it's different. They're saying, "How you doing?" And they mean, "Hey, screw off," right? And it's just a different kind of feel, right? So that brought me back and into my network and stuff. And I wanted to see, frankly, I like the seasons. I like the weather. I discovered I didn't like it out on the West Coast necessarily the same. But, look, the community is strong. And I find there's more opportunity because everyone out there is trying to do this, and they only want to work for the next Facebook or something. And I don't know, it's a little annoying. Out here, there's a lot more people who just want to dive into something and get a good team together, which is what it takes, because you don't always know where you're going to end up when you start off with something. And the talent pool, as Dave said, is incredible. There's just phenomenal people here around the MIT community and all the other colleges here. I was very, very glad to be back.
Yeah, to me, the attraction to even coming to MIT in the first place was grit and focus, which it's hard to find a place other than the Northeast that's as gritty and focused. And you don't get that as much on the West Coast. And to me, the reason that matters is because our probability of success of any given endeavor is much, much higher. If you look at the Link Ventures companies, the Kogo Labs incubated companies. And the reason that matters to me is because the venture capitalists optimize on returns, but the person who's starting a company is optimized on their life. And if you said your odds of success are low, but when it's big, it's going to be Uber or Google, then your odds of having a great life are actually lower than 50-50. When you do it the way we do it in the Northeast, your probability of success goes much higher, and you move quickly, you have many shots on goal. So you end up with a very high probability of having a great life as a founder. And so the venture capital returns turn out to be about the same, but there's a different profile. It's more successes, not as many Googles and Ubers, but many, 1, 3, 5 now, the numbers are getting really big.
Well, the Billy Bean
$billion valuations.
The Billy Bean is startups, man, right? Getting base hits. But I love the way you put that. I think that's awesome. And I think one of the attractions to from an entrepreneur standpoint, I always want to root for the entrepreneur and the underdog. And like, I tell people this all the time, when I'm meeting them, and whether we're trying to buy them or not, their business, I'm like, I want you to succeed, whether I'm on the right path or not. But the thing to consider, most don't realize, is that, again, it's that if you can get a base hit, which, a small company you sell, but get some money, the most important thing for the entrepreneurial mindset is to have the freedom to work on what you want to work on. And if you're just trying to move from one home run to another on the West Coast and pay your bills, whatever, you lose that freedom if you don't happen to be that home run. Whereas if you come out here and you're part of something that gives you a modicum of success, maybe it's not the $1 billion company, but you make a couple million, now you're free for the next few years, right? Maybe you're not going to retire on it, but you're free to explore new ideas. You're free to try things. Like, that is so important. I feel like entrepreneurs, they miss that story because we're all just fed this diet. The stories they want to publish in Forbes and all this stuff is the Facebooks of the world, the Snaps. Oh, look, he went from here to being, multi gazillions. But the real successes, like, are more block and tackle, and that's how you get to the place where you have the freedom to find that next thing. Because
Carlos, we're going to wrap up in a minute, but Mark and I really like to help entrepreneurs have tools to succeed. I know Jeff Bezos drove across country when he founded Abracadabra or Cadabra, that became Amazon. And it was the internet. He realized the architecture of the internet lent itself to creating the juggernaut. What are the technology trends that you see coming down the pike in the next decade that you think the next generation of entrepreneurs should be tracking and figuring out how to harness?
Also, that's a really big question because I don't try to be a prognosticator of any kind. For me, like within my company, all I try to do is build an amazing team that is responsive, creative, and innovative, and try to give them the process and structure and freedom to do that because I can't predict what's going to be the next thing for us. Live shopping is coming to the US rapidly now, right? It's a $200 billion, $160 billion industry in China. This is like basically QVC on the internet with influencers, right? But it had that because of that change with influencers and all this, it's a fundamental difference. It's not just QVC, but that's big. It's coming, but that's not necessarily a new technology. How does TikTok work? Whatever. If I had to pick one technology that I think is underappreciated by a lot of people that is changing the world and will be the thing to focus on, I think it's Web3, right? Which is what we're calling DeFi, right? It's blockchain and DeFi and all the stuff going on there. I think it's unbelievable the power and the creativity that's going to unleash. I don't know if you saw Brian Armstrong's blog post the other day, but he was like, he had quoted somebody, I think it was some economist who had said, if Bitcoin gets to $200,000 a coin, which we're not far from, frankly, half the world's billionaires are going to be crypto billionaires. Half of the billionaires in the world, even if he's off by a bit and it's 30%, that is freaking nuts. Like, think about that and what that means. And there's still people denying, saying this is not a thing. It's a flash in the pan. I mean, Jamie Dimon was saying that for a while, and now it's luckily new information. He's changed his mind, and JP Morgan's offering Bitcoin and other crypto to their clients. But it's just it's a fairly complicated thing to get your head around. No one's done a really great job of massively simplifying it and getting it in anyone's hands. There's 3% of people in the world who have wallets, crypto wallets of any kind. I think we're less than that. But when you got to get out of the US only mindset to really realize this. This is what I also worry about people here. It just gets so focused. We're 5% of the world's population. We've got banking systems that work. We've got credit systems that work. Go to Eastern Europe. I've got friends over there who had a bank account and the bank closed. They went out of business. There's no FDIC. There's no nothing. The bank just took their money. Like, you're talking to their parents, like hundreds of thousands of dollars. The bank just took it. That happens. Look at what's going on in South America and some countries, right? Problems with currency. If you live there, Bitcoin is a freaking no-brainer. Whether it's Bitcoin or Ether or something, you can put value onto something on the internet that then you can just go to another country and it's there and it holds itself, even if it's volatile. Like, the utility is so big. You really, when you go travel, you see people in Asia and massive populations. China's got a middle class bigger than our entire population, and it's growing. Same with India, and that means something different, middle class, but still they're entering a new type of lifestyle. So all these people everywhere, these will be huge. It's freeing of both their ability to spend and to control and to store value. And it's outside of like government controls. And people keep saying, well, the government's going to regulate it. If you understand it, that's almost impossible, right? And they can regulate our access to it. They can try that, but they also don't have an interest to do that. It's not in there. It's in their interest to let these things grow if you really understand what's going on. And modern monetary theory, which I'm reading a book on now, and it's fascinating to see. So I really think that is going to be a phenomenal area of innovation and drive change really rapidly. And for everybody, I mean, I could say the classics like AI also, but you combine all these things and it gets crazy. But I had to pick one thing. There you go.
Yeah, I'm gonna let Dave wrap up, and then I'm gonna do the closing here. But Dave, do you have any follow-up questions that you want to propose to Carlos?
I love the way Carlos says, look, I try not to be a prognosticator, and then he's like incredible vision about a topic that everyone should care about. So I feel like we could probably go for another hour on how things are changing. There's a lot actually within Thrasio too, in terms of variety of products people have access to and growth rate of search on Amazon versus other types of search. And I really feel like we're due a follow-up. But Carlos, you gave me a lot of credit for your success, which I appreciate. But it's just incredible what you've done. I mean, I'm just insanely proud to just know you and watch it. And I think that pretty soon it'll be put in the context of entrepreneurial history, and it'll be clear to everyone else. Right now, it's kind of an unknown story. But I think when you zoom out and look at what you've achieved over just the last 4 years, right? it's remarkable. So it's
Well,
really
I got a
appreciate
couple
it.
things to say about that. Thank you very much. Most people don't know, but Dave had to loan me money to buy my interest in Course Advisor because I didn't have the money to put in it. And he was awesome about that and did it, and without even blinking, and it was not a big deal. I mean, look, this, and my partner Josh, Josh Silverstein. I mean, we wouldn't be anywhere near where we are without that guy. Unbelievable mind, incredible ability to focus and grow and see around corners as well. And the team we built at Thrasio to do this, right? The credit goes to this whole group, but thank you very much for that.
So Dave, actually, just on that point, in a few weeks, months, Carlos is going to go to a next level. He's going to be seen as a Midas touch guy.
Mhm.
And when people Google this show, they'll get some insight into him. What's something you want to get on record now before people think he can do anything right? What's something that people may not be aware of in terms of values or action that you should understand when it comes to
Well, I'll
Carlos?
tell you one thing that didn't come up in the show so far, but a lot of people followed, Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, because they believe they're pure forces of good in the world, that their motivation is to make the world better at the core. They're not in it just to make money. They're in it to make money and then turn around and make the world better with that money. And everybody recognizes that in Carlos too, but that's a critical factor. Otherwise, people won't come and flock to you and flock to your ideas. And I don't think we touched on that part of the story at all. But our mission at Kogo, our success rate is so high with our companies that we only want to empower people to become billionaires if they have that core motivation. And so Carlos was really version 1.0, the very first CEO in the incubator, and kind of set the tone for everything now. So I think that part of the story is worth knowing.
Yeah. So with that said, we could go, endless hours, and it's amazing. And I'm so happy to have Carlos and obviously Dave with us today. I'd like to remind all our listeners you can find this show, shrimptank.com/Boston, iHeart, all the ways that you can subscribe to your podcast. We'd love to get your followership. These gentlemen, I mean, this is you couldn't pay for this education right now. It's the most valuable set of information that I've heard on the internet, just myself personally. So I'm privileged. You guys are both rock stars. John's my favorite guy of all time. He's uber connected across the board as well. So with that said, I want to thank you both for being on the show today, and we look forward to having you back for some updates.
Thanks, Mark.
Great. Thanks for having us, man. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp